And in the next panel, creating the right strategy to engage with the employers. In this panel, we have the big honor to introduce Ms. Candy Chambers, Executive Director, Direct Employers Association, Susan Kratz, national expert from the European Parliament. She's responsible for the mutual learning program for public employment services in Europe, and also Maria Isabel León from the Private Business Institutions Confederation, CONFIEP. She's also coming here on behalf of the employers, but also from the academic viewpoint, if I'm not mistaken. David Herranz, CEO of ADECO, Regional Director for Latin America. For those of you who do not know, ADECO is a leading human resource, one of the top 10 employers at the worldwide level. My colleague, David Rosas, will be moderator this panel. He's an expert on labor markets from the IDV. We will now start with this panel. I would like to thank the panel members beforehand for being here, for being willing to participate, and for sharing their experience. And thank you all for being here. I would like to start by Susan Kratz. The first question for Suzanne is, in your experience, Suzanne, what are the strategies that are relevant to link or generate this relationship between PS and employers? ¿Cuáles son sus estrategias, o cree usted, para enlazar a esos dos grupos?
So I was asked to prepare strategic elements. The right strategy for all countries, I think that is not possible. But elements can be used everywhere, and that's what I want to do. Let me start with one remark about Europe. When I was working at the European Commission, I was responsible for a mutual learning program for many public employment services in Europe, and that has taught me one thing. Public employment services are very different, and countries are very different. So what we see at the moment is that some public employment services, and these are here, I would say, have very advanced services for employers, while there are others that do not see that employers are so relevant customers, but they focus very much on job seekers as customers. And if at best they see employers as an instrument only, not at real customers, as an instrument to place job seekers. And there's the third group in Europe, mainly in Eastern Europe, a small and diminishing group where where employers are obliged by law to submit their vacancies to the public employment services. And therefore, we have a strong variation of what is going on. A second point I would like to make before going to the more operational level is what makes a strategy relevant for a PES? How can you see that all staff is working into a direction to better serve employers? So it has to be in the strategic documents of a public employment service, starting by its mission, going on with the vision, the definition of the objectives, and what is very relevant for the everyday work and to raise the awareness of all managers in the public employment service is it has to be in the target setting system of a public employment service. And at European level, this has been defined for the whole European network of public employment services. There exists a network where the general directors of the public employment services meet, and they compare services for employers among themselves, and this is called bench learning. And they're one of the 7 areas for qualitative performance assessment is the setup of services for employers. And in the terms of quantitative monitoring, you have their concrete indicators like filling of vacancies or customer satisfaction, not only job seekers, but also to which extent employers are satisfied with the services. And this has really given a push to further develop monitoring systems, but also, when you are looking bad, to your surprise or not to your surprise, to develop further services for employers. As regards now strategic elements, I think it complements well the contribution made by Canada, which was more oriented towards the government level and education level. And as regards the public employment services, concrete actions, what a public employment service can do. Taking into account digitalization, I would like to stress that the most important tool public employment services can develop is a good online platform. Because like in Peru, like in most other countries, public employment services do not have enough staff to reach all employers. It is simply not possible. Yeah? You have so many small and medium enterprises. You do not have enough staff to visit all. So the most important tool is to have a very good online platform and publishing clear information about the service offer of a public employment service. What do you have to offer for employers? Yeah, in Europe, it is often about their recruitment, pre-selection service and help for filling vacancies, but also we heard about subsidies. Yes, that information have a clear picture what they can expect from a public employment services, and as best also the forms they have to fill that is easier than for the public employment service. And more advanced public employment services, naturally all should have a very good vacancy portal, and we are going to hear more from you about this. And some also have a competency-based matching. Yeah, it can be a simpler matching, not based on competencies, but on broader categories of vacancies, linking them with job seeker profiles. And employers in a so-called e-job room can register. And as we know from other web portals, they can then look for appropriate candidates. They can also click buttons for more personalized support, as we know from big retailers, online retailers, and so on, using all these instruments. But I would like to stress another point, going beyond the online portal, additional activities, and that leads me back to the partnerships. You know what works very well in Europe is when public employment services have an administrative board at local level, at regional level, and so on, bringing together employer associations, trade unions, other stakeholders, and they discuss the labor market situation, they inform each other, and employers can tell the public employment services where they see gaps, where they experience further needs, and employment services get also better knowledge how to shape active labor market policy programs. They can have further targeted meetings. I know public employment services, they have regular invitations, regular meetings with employers sitting together. Again, like Canada, you have to sit together, yeah? And to see, does a certain driver certificate help to place many unemployed? Or does another smaller training, can that help to better serve employers, but also to serve unemployed? So, yes, and a last point, and that is then all I can tell more later, is special activities. What I found interesting, and I think it originated from a mutual learning event at European level, is that some public employment services have special promotional activities, an employer's day or employer's week, because employers do not know much about public employment services, and sometimes these have a bad reputation. I do not want into details about this now, that has also some reasons, but how to reach them, to target resources and then to invest many resources on specific days. For example, to send out all job center staff to long lists of employers, and then you can really raise awareness if you complement this by roundtables, by media campaign, television or radio announcements, and so on. Because how to bring more vacancies to the PES, so you need to do some promotion. I think this is all for the moment. I can go more into depth later.
Gracias. Candy, how are you? I'm going to speak in English, okay. What are, in your experience, what are the main challenges that you confront to build a strong relation with public employment services or job centers in the U.S.? ¿Cuáles son los retos que han afrontado para poder generar una relación de trabajo sólida con los servicios públicos de empleo?
Okay, well, thank you very much for including me at this meeting. I'm very pleased to be here, and I had taken the advice to meet people, and I've met some of our member companies. So I'm with a company by the name of Direct Employers Association, and we are a member-owned and managed consortium of both recruitment or talent acquisition professionals and regulatory compliance professionals. And the organization was created 16 years ago to reduce online recruiting costs and increase labor market efficiencies. And then in 2007, as a result of our partnership with NASWA, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, as it's called in the United States, we created proprietary software called the National Labor Exchange, or the NLX, which I won't steal Pam's thunder. She's on a panel tomorrow with Nate Williams from LinkedIn, who is one of our members and also uses our National Labor Exchange. So that's kind of what we do, and we're a unique nonprofit, as is NASWA, so we're different in that space. So to give you my frame of reference, Manpower is one of our members, and Canada was speaking, GE, Siemens, some of those folks are our members, and they're all government contractors. And to Suzanne's point, a lot of our members then have to meet their regulatory requirements, which is what we also do, and meet the requirements by sending their jobs to the state employment services, which is a regulatory requirement for everyone. So what are our challenges? Well, one of the biggest challenges is for the workforce agencies to understand what the needs are of the employers in their state. And a lot of that is just because there are so many variables. The size and the industry matters, and the type of organization. Small companies may or may not have human resources, and they might not know how to write job descriptions. They might not know how to even recruit. They might not have the ability or the capital to pay those outrageous, sometimes, recruiting costs. And they, I think, go back to the old-fashioned thought that the employment service is just for people on unemployment. And they don't understand, and folks in the United States like to call it reemployment, and Pam said when one of the prior presentations was showing, she said, I like that, it's employment services. But I think a lot of employers don't understand that employment services offer all types of jobs, from production labor up to almost executive level positions, although those aren't required to be posted on or listed, as we call it in the United States, but they aren't required to be sent to the employment services, but a lot of people do. So you can find any level of job through the state employment service and the state job bank. And one of our members finds that her highest traffic analytics come from the state job banks. And she uses that to hire veterans, which again is a huge opportunity for our members and for companies in general in the United States. There's a great push to hire more veterans. And the other important piece, I think, is to build that long-term relationship and understanding the needs, like I said, of the companies, but you also need to know what the talent is needed, what talent is needed, what the skill sets are that are needed in the industries, what industries, and we all know this, what industries are really hurting right now. I was talking to someone, I think Anton, about mining. Mining is a big problem, so a public employment service should help and try to find out what types of folks you need in the mining industry and how do you fill that talent pipeline, because you can't just bring someone in on day one and make them, you know, even minimally qualified. You need to train them. So what types of apprenticeships? We're actually starting apprenticeships in the United States, and we're building the sites for the Office of Apprenticeships. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, but you have to know, as part of the public employment system or service, you need to know what the companies in your areas need and how you can fill those needs for them. So.
Marisabel, in your experience in Peru in general, in the region, what we see is that the relations of PS with the productive sector have not been so strong as in other countries. In Europe, for instance, in the US or Canada. In your experience in Peru, what are the main challenges that you see that the private sector has faced vis-a-vis the relationship with the private sector in employment matters? I would like to thank you for the invitation. I'm pleased that we are 3 women here and 2 Davids. I really appreciate it. I'm a representative of CONFIEP, the Private Business Institutions Confederation in Peru, which gathers different associations. I have the position of director because I represent the sector of education. My role here today is very special. I'm here acknowledging my fault because I represent employers, but I also represent academia. Our country has 31 million inhabitants, out of which the population which is active is around 23 million, but the economically active population is, the labor force is made up more by men more than women, and which formation is actually very basic, essential. 70% has finished secondary education, and only 30% of this population, which is part of the labor force, the productive force, has university formation, authentic formation. This is a very interesting point here to stress before analyzing the relationship, the public and private relationship. Our country has certain deficiencies in education. In basic education, we have been in the last positions. We've been improving a little bit. We've been going up the list, but we have a problem with basic formation, basic training. The Ministry of Education carried out a study that proved those that are about to graduate, who will be part of the labor market, have big deficiencies to understand what they read or for mathematical reasoning. These are the indicators that we have received from the Ministry of Education.
And this makes us think about the basis of training of the population, which then will turn into the labor force in the country. And I won't even tell you the figures because you will cry, but I will just tell you that they are troubling. So these young people, when they graduate high school or secondary school, which is $500,000 a year, they face the challenge of what to do with their lives. So we have a coverage in general, which is higher, either short career paths of 2-year term institutes, or artistic or pedagogical institutes, or universities, which probably does not account for even 38%. So young people between 16 and 26-year-old, it's approximately 4.6 million. Of these, 1.8 million are the ones that are going to go actually have higher studies when they finish basic education. The others, they go straight to labor market without any kind of training, or this is just, young people who don't work, don't do anything, don't do nothing, don't know anything. So, on the other hand, we have the private sector. Our country is a country which basically is formed by micro and small businesses. They account for over 90%. So we have a big proportion of, I think it's only 3% of big companies, big enterprises. So these small companies, micro and small entrepreneurship, especially micro enterprises, is mainly about women. So we have the highest rate of women entrepreneurs in this region. The problem we have with this kind of productivity and this kind of entrepreneurship and linking education with the labor market is that we are not doing enough as a country to be able to educate and train our labor force. We require, and that's why it is so important to align the work done by the employers with the public sector and with the PSPS. We need to make the synergies to be able to understand that this population that is already working in substandard conditions, they need to be trained. These women, for instance, who are entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs, they usually have very high percentages of failure after a year. But why do they fail? Because they're not trained. They have no idea on how to develop a business plan. They don't know how to market themselves. So we really have an issue of training, which is necessary to solve. So I can tell you that my position is interesting because I am wearing the employer's hat and the academics hat as well. So they say that things happen for a reason, right? Like right now, we are here, 3 women like Goliath and David and Goliath, and there are 2 Davids here. Things happen for a reason. So it is definitely necessary that we do a match between the private sector along with the public sector so that we can create the synergies and this fora for the productive sector to get closer to the academia and also with the PSs, and we can finally close this loop and close this gap of training and education. And also, we also have a problem, the same thing, we have surveys from Manpower saying that instead of going down, it goes up. The volume of companies that actually say that they don't find the right trained people. It's not only in Peru, by the way. In 2013, I think we had a 28% ratio, and in 2015, we're 60% of companies saying that they do not find the right personnel. But there's other countries. Japan is over 60% also. Job matching is bad. Or Brazil, they also have a 60% rate of companies saying. And so I was thinking, what are we doing wrong? Because these countries that I just mentioned, Japan, Brazil, they have universities that are actually top ranked as the best universities. Peru is, well, anyway, I think we're not even there. But the other countries, they don't. They have great universities, and they also have a serious problem of companies finding the rightly trained personnel. So I do believe that it is the right time now. But with a lot of sensitivity and sensibility and sensitivity, we have this opportunity to make this link. We are privileged now because we can do something for our countries. For us to create well-being for everybody, we should be promoters of this good relationship between the productive sector, either big, small, micro, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But to do this link between them and the public sector that issues the laws and the educational sector so that we can have something that finally works. In Peru, companies feel that the young people that are graduated and they go out to the labor market, and this is what's really concerning us, because these are the ones that get the worst jobs, or they usually go to the informal sector. You can say 4% of unemployment rate as compared to the 8% average in Latin America. It sounds really good, but they do go to the informality. The informal sector. We have a law that exists since 2005. We have our vice minister here. I'm going to ask him to revise it because it's been passed a long time ago, so please revise it. But this law does not allow for an actual synergy between the educational sector, and they just want to go and take their, apprentices to the productive sector so that they go these internships or apprenticeships and they can get this on-the-job experiences before they graduate. but the companies don't feel like, oh my God, I have to pay this kid. The kid doesn't know a thing, and it's useless to me. They think, the companies. For that, we need these kids to go to the companies. You can tell me you have dual education or you have these the job banks. Possibly, I don't know. I went to Australia last year. I've seen the Canadian system. They're formidable. I cannot even talk about the German system, but Peru is a completely different country where usually, the big mass is made up by micro and small businesses. They cannot afford paying any kind of subsidies or any kind of money to these apprentices that want to actually get an experience on the job. So that's where the public sector can have something to do. They can actually get all the obstacles out of the way in the form of a law, and so these kids can actually have these kind of on-the-job experiences by being internships or apprenticeships without companies having to pay a penny. And I am not wearing my, private sector hat. I'm not saying that we don't want to do that. What I'm saying is that companies, mostly in our companies, are micro and small businesses. They can, they can just survive, let alone they won't be able to afford paying. We have to be realistic. They cannot afford paying for an apprentice. So maybe large corporations, they can afford paying for these, but not the other ones. And we have to open up this possibility for students to have these actual experiences within the company, so that whenever they finish their apprenticeships, all the other companies can welcome them open arms without having to invest anything because they were trained correctly. So I do believe it is very important to highlight all of these spaces that can be created. In the case of Peru, with the support of the Ministry of Labor, I know you're super open, you're positive, you're working hard, and also the IDB as an international organization. And this is going to allow us to have these spaces for dialogue, right? And I really hope that this really ends up being very fruitful for us. Thank you. David, namesake. So, ADECO has been working with public employment services from Europe and Asia. So can you tell us a little bit what are the different modalities of collaboration with the PS? Yes, first of all, I would like to thank IDB for the invitation. Also acknowledge all the authorities, Peruvian authorities. Really, this is great to organize an event like this. It is very rewarding, and it really puts a lot of value when we talk about knowledge exchange. The fact that we're here is also an acknowledgement to the human resources industry and the PESs, because I think this is the way to go into the future. Not always the private employment services are not always taken into account when they actually pass laws. So, just for you to know, I come here on behalf of a company that is present in 8 Latin American countries with 57,000 employees. We have 10,000 companies as clients, over 300 executives going out, visiting companies every day. We have over 600 payrolls a year, and we generate 2,000 jobs, direct jobs, first-level jobs. So why am I giving you all these numbers? Because in the end, if we do the numbers, we have over 5 or 6% of the human resources quota, and this is the brokerage system for Latin America. We are talking about over 3 million jobs in Latin America. We're talking about job generation that is very powerful and trained. So this sector has the companies as clients, but the beneficiaries, the ultimate beneficiaries, are the employees or the job seekers. So if we believe that this is a sector that has certain opinions and criteria, we do also have a say in the labor market. And particularly, I can tell you that there are now some regulations that are given for this. We have 181.0, the ILO directive. But unfortunately, today in Latin America, there are very few that have ratified this directive. I know that over 30 countries that have ratified the 180.0, but it talks about the articulation, public-private articulation of the employment services. So I do believe there is an opportunity to make it more dynamic and making the services that we provide more dynamic, those for the job seekers. Clients are always the companies, that's what I'm saying, but the ultimate beneficiaries are the job seekers or the employees. So we participate as facilitators of employability and also catalyzers and help channel formality and also getting out the new trends. I've heard so far a lot this competence gap that exists between formal education and the requirements of the companies and job matching. So this gap that exists in skills and competencies is that we should try to close this gap by identifying what are the trends first. And when I talk about dynamic companies, it's companies that are always going out looking for clients and they exactly know what's happening. This is like us. We know about the trends. We know where we're heading to. We know what's happening with the labor market. So we are already participating with different entities and organisms internationally, locally, regionally, with the objective of trying to contribute as much or as little as we can and saying we know the trends, we know where we're heading to and what are the competencies that will actually help, what are the companies looking for, and so we can also adapt training. And then how can young people can get into the labor market? We are mainly focused on formality, on young people, and also the reduction of inequalities. We always say that if with a good job, you can get a good life. Having said this, and by looking very concrete and pragmatic ways of collaboration, a company like ours, like Areco, and with the general market, right, or a private company, a private employment service, I think there are several ways of collaboration. I brought 4 examples, and I will start with one which is very practical, which is a UK example. By the 80s already, UK, there was a meeting where the back then government said the following. They said, you know, let's just stop measuring ourselves by who is hiring, but let's measure how many people are actually working. So it doesn't really matter if in the end this came from a private or public employment service. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that these people need to work. So we want quality employment. So from then they started working on coordinating with private employment services that already existed back then. And today, I think the last crisis was 6 or 7 years ago in UK. The public-private relationship meant that the government asked the private employment services to help relocate the unemployed people. 80,000 were hired in a year through the private employment services in coordination with the UK government. So these are practical, very true data. And this is just a change in the mindset, saying it really doesn't matter where it comes from. It really doesn't matter who facilitates it. The end result is good. As much, the more people get a job, the better. Now, in the Netherlands, collaboration with the private employment services, it's also since the 80s. And then during the 90s, there were mobility centers already established in coordination with the private employment services. In 2008, they started with an initiative where the private employment services were an active stakeholder. They were considered as part of the solution in the search for a job for those who were unemployed. And today, according to data coming from the government, 35% of unemployed are looking for their first job through a private employment service. And then this is also practical data. This is true data. There is an effective collaboration between companies and also the private employment services, and they all know the needs of the market, and this makes it more agile. Job insertion gets better. In Germany, since the 90s, they work on the database sharing, which is basically sharing information about candidates and vacancies from the private and public employment services. There are annual meetings, 6-month, every semestral meetings, and they coordinate both at the private and public levels, and they have indicators, and through them they share the information in order to ensure that effectively all of this coordination actually has a result. And this is happening. This is very practical. Then in France, since 1994, they have a coordination between the public and private employment services. In France, the penetration rate of human resources companies into the labor market is the highest in the world. It's 2.6%. This makes it the market to be very dynamic, to be very agile. So between the private employment services and the public employment services, there is an exchange of databases constantly. And the government even requests the private employment services to open their branches to make sure that unemployed people can go and look for jobs. So, only ADECO, that has 10% of share, has 1,200 branches. So this means that the public employment services has 1,200 offices that are actually open for people looking for a job, for job seekers. So with this collaboration happens that public employment services are using resources that they don't have. They don't have the technology, they don't have human resources. So by looking this kind of collaboration, the public employment services can be more effective, and then at the same time they can actually achieve their goals, which is to ensure that there are more people working in the labor market formally. Then from then we start getting more sophisticated, in terms of the relationship between the public and the private employment services. And then we're talking about not only incorporating into the labor market, but also working upskilling, that is to develop the skills even further of the job seekers. This is happening already in different markets. I'm sorry, I come from Spain, so I speak really fast. But in Spain there is a very high young unemployment rate. And concretely, we're trying to make it better. And the government has already set in motion a series of policies so that the private employment services can actually improve the skills of those young people who do not fit into the labor market, so that they can have better access to the labor market, and therefore we can try to reduce the dramatic unemployment rate among young people. So these are very practical examples of how can we articulate this collaboration. And I'm sorry, we tried to keep up, but she was speaking really fast. Otra pregunta.
In your experience, what are the best services that public employment service can offer to employers? Or what are the services who are most valued by employers that are offered by public employment services? ¿Cuáles son los servicios que son más apreciados por los empleadores, que pueden ser ofertados por los servicios públicos de empleo?
So unfortunately, I do not speak so fast as you do. That is really a disadvantage. I get back to your question. I would like to and connect this with 2 points you made. First, mismatches and gaps on the labor market. What is the public employment services role? Because in my view, we should be honest, public employment services cannot do all. Yeah, as we heard, much is with the education system. And public employment services can offer, for example, in case they identified concrete skills need, second chance education for low-skilled young people, but only as far as this is supported by the government and there are funds available. And they can offer, as I said earlier, smaller training units to better correspond to the current needs of employers. But there I see limits. And what I see, we have, we also, and you refer to this, that other countries also have very bad figures as regards employers looking for job seekers, and they experience recruitment difficulties. Yeah, and I'm currently analyzing with researchers apprenticeships, internships, and volunteering, and there this also was an issue. And the main issue was that we have to also to be honest, who is responsible for what and who pays which costs. Because sometimes employers expect the 100% candidate, and I think employers should also be ready to invest themselves a little bit. Yeah, and there sometimes too much burden is put upon the public sector, and we cannot be expect all 100% to be 100% ready for a concrete job. But that is, I do not speak about basic skills here or transversal skills like presentation, because this should be clearly a task of the education system and of the universities to integrate this. Let me get back to skills development and private employment services. I totally agree that private employment services are an important player on the labor market. And we have many countries where there are very well functioning agreements. And you mentioned one very relevant point, and I would like to make a second one. The first you mentioned is that private employment agencies or temporary work agencies, they are often mediators, and therefore they do not feel responsible for skills development. I think you mentioned good practices, and it would be important that all temporary work agencies take the responsibility also for staff training, because they do not always do this. And a second point is, and that is for the governments, and we have a directive in the European Union for that, but allowing for many clauses, is to ensure a level of equal treatment. Because that is not only about skills, but it is about the position of a worker and the rights a worker has in a company coming from a different agency. Yeah? The public employment service mediates directly to a job, but a temporary agency, temporary work agency is a mediator. And this category of job workers needs protection. So now about the second point, and then I get back to your question. It's about long-term relationships. And the magic word is to create trust. Because once you manage to create trustful relationships with a concrete employer, then they are also ready to take more vulnerable groups. Public employment services have the responsibility alone or with private contracted providers to make them job ready and to place them. But people with a bad work biography, breaks or low skills levels, so employers need really trust to hire them, even with subsidies. Subsidies can help a bit, but subsidies cannot do all. So what can public employment services in terms of organization do? Organizational models to come to a trustful relationship. Not organizational models. First, they have to deliver good services. They have to make employers happy, because it's like when you buy a shirt or shoes or a service, when you get a good product, then you get back. And as regards maintaining and developing of relationships, you need good specialists. You need a staff who is able to really work with employers. As I trained myself, specialist staff in employment services, I know what I'm talking about. And therefore, public employment services have different models. Most have key account managers for large companies, because you cannot have them for all. As employers are very practical and result-oriented, they do not have much time, so they need a concrete contact person. That can be very helpful. And on the other side, we have two different models. We have a public employment service in Germany who have a very strong employer service, mainly responsible for all requests from employers to fill vacancies, and they fill them. Yeah, and they are also responsible for maintaining relationships, calling the employers from time to time, do selected visits, because this all helps that they very well know what are the needs, who can be placed there. In case you have a very separate employer service, that comes at a price, because they do not know the job seekers, because they are prepared by the employment counselors. So that means from a management point of view, you have to shape the interfaces. Yeah, you have to arrange processes where they meet, processes where the employer service gets to know the job seekers to place. And therefore, some public employment services, this is the more traditional model, they have still an integrated model. So employment counselors do all. So they fill all the vacancies and they place the job seekers. This is a good reward for an employment counselor, you know, to see the end result, not only to prepare the job seeker, but also see in a positive case how he is placed. But what I have seen in practice, they have different skills. Yeah, very good employment counselors, and I saw it in practical training, they sometimes have difficulties to switch roles. Yeah, they treat, in the worst case, they treat an employer a bit like a job seeker. Yeah? What are your needs? But you have to be well prepared. So that means you can take different options, but you have to be aware what are the shortcomings of each of the models and to well train the staff. So this is not about concrete services, but about how an organizational model could work.
Thank you. Candy, so I'm going to refer the question for you on services. What are, from the employer perspective, what are the services that you value the most that are offered by employment services? ¿Cuáles son los servicios que aprecian más desde el lado de los empleadores?
Okay. We talked about regulatory requirements that some employers have, government contractors, for instance, and they have to list their jobs. They also have to do outreach and positive recruitment. And the state workforce agency is the perfect group to do that with. But it has to be give and take. And there is a great benefit to the employer once they get to know and trust, as Suzanne said, the state workforce agency personnel. And I think we keep hearing about how there's so much work that still needs to be done, and no one's getting what they need. But I want to recognize the states, at least in the United States, that do things really well. And one of the things that some of our states do are to build business advisory councils by some name, whatever they might call it. But those are brilliant for the employers, and they're brilliant for the public employment systems or services because it gives that regular opportunity to meet and exchange information. So the state or the public employment service now has a firsthand look at what is needed by the employers in their area. And the employer has a one-on-one opportunity to say, this is what we need, and this is why it's important, and this is how you can help us. And that's the key. We sometimes just go back to, what are we here for? We're here to find jobs for people. That's our mission. That's our goal. And that's, all of us share that same mission. So we sometimes try to make it so difficult. And every person that you find a job for is a success. And we need to celebrate the successes. Granted, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I still maintain that even the production labor jobs are really good jobs. In the United States, some of those folks make $100,000 a year. Those are really good jobs. But we tend to only focus on, we got to send people to college, we got to do this, we've got to do that. We need to focus on finding employment. And I think having those business advisory councils, by whatever name you want to call them, is a great opportunity. Like I said, you need to understand that one size doesn't fit all. Every company is different. Every company's needs are different. And probably the most important thing for the Public Employment Service is to understand that to each employer, their needs are the most important. And you need to realize that my company's needs are what you need to focus on because my company's most important. So you have to battle through that a little bit, and those business advisory councils can help each of the companies understand that maybe they do have some similar needs to the other employers in that area. And then they can work together to try and move some things forward and to have change happen. That's the important thing, and there is strength in numbers. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. But when you bring people together and you can see that not everyone's as different as we think they are, and we can use that information for the good of all. And I think that's the most important thing. The most important thing is that you build a partnership with those employment services and those employers. Because, as I said earlier, we try to hire, veterans and individuals with disabilities, and the states can do that for us. The states can help our employers, and we have over 900 members of the largest government contractors in the country, and they need help. And the state workforce agencies in the United States can help get those individuals, and those partnerships that we build are incredibly important, obviously to fill the jobs, but to show that we're meeting our outreach and positive recruitment requirements as well. So I sit back and think, why wouldn't you do that? But I think one thing we also have to think about, and we have to look at ourselves in the mirror, sometimes we have this opinion that we know everything that the company needs, and we know what they should be doing. And I'm willing to bet that we really don't. And you need to say, you know what, I need to find some employers that I trust and aren't trying to just sell me a bill of goods, but I need to find someone that is going to help me be successful. Because we need to count on one another. And we both need to hear what the other one needs and have that strong partnership, that trust between us, so everyone's successful.
Now, to continue with what you were talking about, what is the productive structure in the country, and that most of the companies in Peru are micro or small businesses. And you were saying that it is not possible for many people to afford apprentices or interns. So how are you making sure, or let me rephrase it, Peru is it's very common to have these programs like Productive Youngsters, which is offered by the Ministry of Labor. And then in the past, the country has had this program, and they asked the companies to afford to pay for the apprentice or the intern, and then this somehow ensured that the intern or apprentice was going to learn actually something and not just making photocopies or getting coffee. So if I understand the problem that a lot of micro and small businesses cannot afford paying for an intern, but what are other mechanisms that you are devising or thinking of or envisaging to really ensure that the young person actually learns something? Well, I see two problems. One is the one that you are mentioning, the fact that young people during training and during education, and the other problem is that we have this big mass, 70% of the labor market who are not duly trained, and so definitely we need to invest on that. Luckily enough, the government of Peru is a government that is made up by people coming from the private sector, and so they do understand how this works. So I do believe that the necessary spaces are going to be there. Now, the fact of having this apprenticeship, now there is a bill that is going to go to the Congress, to the Parliament for its approval, and this deals with experiential apprenticeships, and this is related to the new law passed last year. We believe that, or we want for this to happen, that is, for the student to be able to work in the company for some time, being monitored and being guided by the persons in charge of this from the educational institute, and then related to someone or having a contact person in the company. But it is basically the educational centers that should ensure that the whole path of the student within the private sector is correct one. But what we want is that this does not imply a subsidy, because probably maybe the company can pay for it, and maybe this is something that is workable. But I think the big volume of micro and small business would not be able to afford this. So I think we need to really be clear and be real in terms of the commitments that we can all assume. So maybe I think the educational sector has to play a more prominent role. They need to be more committed to their students. And then also, I think these are times of commitment, but I mean real, true commitments as a country, not just thinking about now or thinking about money. I think we really need to think about the well-being of the citizens in the future. And then I'm also worried about this big millions of people working without really being productive. So David was saying that when you have a good job, you can get a good life. So to get a better job, people need better skills. So therein is another challenge too. And from the public sector, we somehow need to find a mechanism or a way to reinforce training of this big mass of people that are not duly trained. Not so long ago, we had the visit of the Ministry of Production. So we had a meeting with him at Confiep, He was telling us everything he was doing, and he told us that he had created a few centers. And so the idea was to formalize the informal companies. So micro and small businesses will be able to get access to these job centers. They will be they will have access to advisory on legal issues, tax issues, so that they can get formal. But we also told the minister that we were worried about training, about these people that were going to get formal. They need to be trained, they need to get better skills, and we need to get the funds for these people to be trained. In Colombia, for instance, they have SENA. I know Julio Gamero, he is in charge of that. And in Colombia last year, we were there, and he was telling us about SENA and the amount of money that the Colombian government is investing to train working force, the labor force that is already working, maybe online courses or face-to-face, but with very short courses. It really doesn't have to be big career paths, right? But they can be short courses, workshops that would allow these people to have a better profile, to have better skills, and to grow within the companies. So I do believe there are some possibilities, and these are two main areas where the private sector can work hand in hand with the public sector, so that we can do this with a lot of seriousness and with a lot of commitment. And just a comment, just on the same line of thought, I do believe that commitment is important, but I think we also need mechanisms to ensure quality and relevance. Colombia, as you say, with SENA, the government spends 1 billion a year. It's huge. But then when you see the figures of productivity in Colombia, the figures are not that much better than Peru's. So it's not just a matter of just having courses here and there. But I think we need to think about quality and pertinence as well. So there is where we need to focus more as countries. Peru's experience of commitment, I think we need to be careful about it, because you've seen what has happened in the country. In the past years, there has been an explosion of private universities and institutes with no quality control, with no relevance, nothing. So definitely we need to make sure that anything that is there. Okay, so let me just respond to that. In Peru, I don't believe that there is an excess of universities or institutes or technical centers. More so than the number, it's 142 universities in the country and 806 technological institutes. But in terms of coverage, it's 38% only. Colombia has 45% coverage. I think the average in Latin America is 50%. Argentina has over 70% coverage. So I think we still have a long ways ahead of us. I agree with you that, quality goes hand in hand with coverage. But in our country, I think we already have an experience that dates back to 2006 when the CNIAS is created. And there are many institutions at the technical level, which is where I work, that have already been getting certified. So, for instance, I am the president of Asiste Peru, which groups 20-something of institutes. However, we account for 80% of enrollment in the country, so and we are certified, not locally, not internationally, but there is a commitment. That's what I'm trying to say. Definitely there is a good intention for education to be of quality and pertinent. So I think we are already there. We're not at the goal, but... So, David, from your experience in ADECO, what are the services, and same question that I've asked, our fellow panel members, what are the services? Well, first of all, as I was saying, we have the companies as clients, that is employers, but the ultimate beneficiaries are the employees, and this is important for you to remember, because we need to look after the interests of both. So employees also, they need to have a high satisfaction level, even though the services are aimed at the companies. But for the employer, I will try to speak slower. I think the interpreters will thank him. So the services that we offer to employers, if we wanted to summarize, we are offering talent management services. And the employers they're looking for talent, and they say when, how they need it, and where they need it. That's what they tell us. So if I wanted to summarize what we do, that's what we do. Now, if we actually look at what we do for employees or job seekers or candidates that actually end up finding a job through a service like ours, well, we are social integrators. We help the employees to find their first job. We are a bridge to go from education to companies. While it is true it is not through apprenticeships, and I would like to do so. We're working with the Global Apprenticeship Network, the GAN. We're also working in collaboration with the different associations, but definitely we are a facilitator of that, getting your first job. So young people graduating their universities or their technical institutes, they start getting into the labor market, they gain experience, and then they find that their skills are being developed with their first job. So we also are a vector for accessibility. We facilitate the access to market for some people. We are also facilitators of mobility for those people who want to move and because by choice or because they have to do it. There are a series of European countries to facilitate integration of refugees, for instance, into the labor market. We also channel this kind of access for these people. Also, it's always quality jobs and always within the legal framework. And also we are facilitating inclusiveness. Our sector is a sector that sometimes is demanded by companies because they don't know how to make it grow, how to have more people with disabilities in their company or women. They don't know how. Sometimes they say, well, you can help us. So we think about that. How can we help? What is your profile? What do you need? What are the positions that are more simple to place, or what do I need to do for my company to be more accessible to people with disabilities? And we're helping there too. Inclusiveness, either gender, disabilities, or any other kind of inclusiveness. We're also creators of agility. We improve employability by developing skills. We not only hire or recruit, we not only select for companies, but we also work in training and shaping these people. We also work in diversity. We help companies to have the greatest diversity and the best diversity. Sometimes companies, they don't know how to manage diversity. We're not only working with large corporations, we also work with micro and small businesses, and they need to work with professionals so that they can ensure diversity within their companies. So we adapt our needs to each of the companies. We see either the needs of the market or the needs of the countries or the context where the companies work. Thinking about the employees, we are a trustworthy company to work with them. There are many, many individuals who trust us. And also, we channel hope. I know this sounds way too out there, but I've seen situations in Spain with an unemployment rate rising up to 70%. And when you are looking when you're looking at this kind of rates, actually you're given hope, not only a job. So this also makes us feel that we're providing valuable services. We also grow employability, therefore we're actually increasing formality, and also we're increasing ultimately GDP. It is true that the contribution to the economy of the employment market, if it is formal, it is huge. If we generate employment, we generate quality jobs, and we're generating really good economies, and we are reducing informality. And this is what we're trying to work on. This is our purpose, and this is what we're trying to do as a sector. And then from the service standpoint, as I was saying, we have talent management, of course, at the basis, but then there are many other entities that are requesting our services, and they are increasingly more sophisticated, such as intelligence, labor market intelligence. What is this? Well, a lot of companies say, and I'm just giving an example, I want to open a factory in Peru, but I want to know if there are engineers in Peru. Or I want to know if in Peru I will find the profile of people that we need. We know the markets. We have intelligence, and we advise the company, saying, you know what, yes, you can open it here in Peru, but not in this city, in this other city, because the laws will help you better, because here there are more engineers, or because there is a demographic bonus in this area. So, this is intelligence, and companies are requesting this kind of services from us, labor market intelligence. They are also requesting discussing talent acquisition. A lot of companies are asking for us to help them get the talent they need. There is a big gap between what the companies need or demand and what actually exists in the labor market. And this is important. In Latin America, not so long ago, we had the World Economic Forum in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I was talking to a technological company that was telling me that around 1 million jobs could be generated if there was actually enough technological skills in the region. But they're not. There's a big gap. There's a huge potential of companies that want to invest in the region, but they don't find the correct profiles. And when they ask me, where should I invest, we have to do almost micromanagement and saying, this is good, this is not, this is good, this is not. So they're actually looking with a magnifying glass certain profiles for them to develop their activities. So it is really important to close this gap between the supply and the demand in the region. We also participate with direct participation, and we're not only doing temporary recruitment, talent acquisition, selection, both of basic jobs, but also middle management and upper management. We do recruitment through temporary recruitment services, or BPO, the business process. A lot of companies are asking for help in training, in company training. And this is something that we forget sometimes, because training does not end at the school. It has to continue on the job. And so companies are constantly changing because the world is changing, and then employees also have to update and change and adapt to the new technologies, to the new needs of each of the companies. The world of in-company training is something that definitely sometimes is neglected. And this makes a country more or less competitive. If you have the tools that are well articulated for companies to invest in on the job or in training company, and we have very good examples in the region. We have a representative here of the Chilean organization. In Chile, there is a very good initiative through the CC by which companies have the capacity to invest resources in training, in company training. So this makes the employee and the employer more competitive. This means the country is more competitive. And this is reflected in the fact that we participate in an index called Global Talent Competitive Index. This measures 180 countries based on who is more competitive in terms of talent. So first place in Latin America is Chile, place 34 in the world. Next one is 54, and then down on the list. So when the country really wants to be competitive, they can be competitive, but they need to work with the companies and with the employees. And then lastly, we also provide management services, and then outsourcing. There are companies that need to hire a lot of people at the same time, so they outsource this. And then lastly, career management also, and this has to do, well, unfortunately there are companies that need to make decisions, of course, downsizing or closing. And so definitely we need to serve those employees as well, those employees that are ending their career paths. So we also support these employees so that they can either be inserted in other markets or retire. So this is a portfolio of services that we offer. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. With the team, we have thought about making this an interactive session. So we wanted to see if you have questions from the audience. I don't know, in the end, how was the organization, if there are indeed questions from the audience. Maria Isabel, question for you. What does the latest labor market study say, and if you have any response from the educational sector? Well, the Ministry of Labor has some studies on labor demand. It carries out every year, and they're very interesting. But beware, these studies are carried out based on the formal number of companies, the least number of companies in the country. For 2016, for instance, the study said that the companies have determined, because all of the companies, and I tell you my experience, we receive calls when there is a collaborator who is vacant. They ask us, are you going to hire someone else who will fill this vacancy, or if we are hiring anyone throughout the year. In the latest, it said that formal companies announced that they were to need 50,000 employees for 2016. Different positions, actually. Mainly, though you might not think it is right, it's surveillance and security. Our country is going through a very serious problem with criminality, and this is being reflected in this need to have skilled labor for this sector. What is being required at this level is someone who's graduated from secondary school, high school. This profile is the one that is mostly required for, well, it was for 2016. The requirement for professionals at university or college level are the least. But the jobs that are mainly reflected in this study is simple jobs that I mentioned: surveillance, security, sales, telephone operators. There are lots of call centers that are working here in the country, and they are ranked first in demand of job positions according to this 2016 study. Thank you. Susan, what type of support what kind of support? Lo voy a decir en inglés. ¿Qué tipo de apoyo pueden ofrecer los servicios públicos de empleo a las empresas de mediano tamaño o empresas pequeñas? Creo que hay muchas empresas pequeñas y medianas y tenemos que ser realistas. Los servicios públicos no pueden atender a todas, por lo menos no todas a la vez, pero pueden atraerlas para que las empresas pequeñas y medianas puedan enviar sus puestos vacantes al Servicio Público de Empleo, de modo que las puedan ayudar. Luego, dependerá del concepto de servicio y algunos ejemplos en Europa, y se puede dar incluso asesoría, pero para ser sincera, tenemos dos situaciones diferentes en los países europeos. Países donde hay un excedente de fuerza laboral, de PEA, y estos se enfocan más en buscadores de empleo. Y tenemos países en donde hay escasez en la fuerza laboral, hay una sociedad que envejece más rápido, Alemania, Austria, que buscan más servicios de asesoría en recursos humanos. ¿Por qué? Porque están buscando apoyo, más que nada. Las herramientas en línea están siendo además desarrolladas en todas partes. Me parece que es un buen campo de aprendizaje mutuo. Lo que se pueda ofrecer en línea es importante también, y cuando se combina esto con buenas actividades de promoción, es posible alcanzar por lo menos aquellos medios o empresas pequeñas y medianas menos formales. Para las microempresas, que son muy frecuentes aquí, creo yo, es diferente la figura. Es diferente poder atenderlas. Se necesita, pues, ahí tener un concepto especial. How is technology affecting the services that you offer, especially the matching that takes place, or supporting companies in finding the right match? Technology is allowing you to incorporate new services, or is it affecting your services in a certain way? Would you? Well, technology affects in two ways. First, from how my processes improve. This is a question that I think you refer from the recruitment and selection viewpoint. Well, indeed, this is a tremendous facilitator from how we do to be more agile, if you will, in finding the employees that the company needs, competence-based matching, or depending on any other variable that the client might demand. Today, we are working a lot in getting the company closer to the candidate. It is true that from the technological viewpoint with our client companies, the gap is small. Almost all companies have access to technology. Almost all companies have a good system to administer human resources. Where we have to work and focus more on is where we take the labor market closer to the employee, meaning that today I would say that from a smartphone, from your pocket, you can do everything. We are developing mobile apps so that the candidates through their palm might look for the best job, compare, and so on and so forth. I can give you an example, and it is even fun, something that we did through technology. We were talking about the possibility of developing internships and apprenticeships and filling this gap between training and the company. Through the GUN, the Global Apprentice Network, we are lucky to participate in this network, and we had a meeting with Coparmex, which is the Mexican co-op, and with this company we decided they wanted to push to develop labor practices with real commitment. So we said, let's see how we do it. We had a meeting in Cuernavaca. We were going to prepare these, and in the plane, while going to, it was in Cuernavaca. We were going to the capital city. I was sitting next to a 21-year girl, and I asked her, tell me how you manage your employability, because I'm too old for this. Technology is in the hands of the young people. And she told me, if I don't have this on my palm, it isn't worthwhile. I do everything through my mobile phone. I buy, I administer my house, everything. So if I could help you, the first thing, I would like commitment from the employer, and I would like it to make public. Do you know how Uber works or TripAdvisor work? So she gave us a hint, and what we did, to make the story short, is to develop an app, and we launched it this week, where for free we put this app at the service of the market. The companies might mount a training or apprenticeship program where the students might incorporate. This has to be harmonized. It should be real practices, and they should be good to develop the employer from the employee. The student, in this case, what he does is he commits himself to make this practice productive for the company. So we have this platform. We avail this platform to everyone. Companies join on the one hand and candidates on the other hand. They have to follow this apprenticeship for 3 months, zero cost from the service viewpoint. I make my database grow, but in the end, both will have a commitment. This means that the candidate, when they leave the employer's house, they will give 1 to 5 stars depending on the experience. And the employer, same thing. He will score him depending on his commitment. So the commitment here is very clear. The fact that the candidate will be trained or formed, and the commitment from the student to commit himself. This is like Uber or TripAdvisor, and this is responding to your question with a very practical example. Why is technology important and how it facilitates processes? Very good example. I hope you don't have the copyright to this example. Maria Isabel, there are several questions for you. I think that, well, there are lots of questions on education. One question that maybe was not well understood, what you mentioned regarding the apprenticeship. If they are not being paid, why should they bother working for free? It is very simple. This is not a law. It is not written in stone. This is not affecting the labor rights of youngsters, because this is not about a labor right. In our country, we had, I think that the year before last, 2015, if I remember correctly, we had a law that was passed by the Congress. It was the Pulpin law. This is how it's been called. It was to promote the first job, but through the reduction of their labor rights. So there was quite a reaction from the youth, because entering into your first job with reduced rights caused quite a turmoil here, and this law was repealed. The government is now pushing for a law to promote youth employment, but there's no problem with labor rights. But there's intervention through the state, and they assume the payment of Social Security and health, 9% of the payroll coming out from the employer. This will be taken over by the state. Now, regarding internships or apprenticeship, there's a different law. There is a law that we have to modify here. It does not look for creating a labor relationship between the youth and the company. There's no relationship whatsoever. It facilitates the transit from this apprenticeship that happens before and after the candidate is being formed. There's even apprenticeship, formal apprenticeship, because this is something that happens when they have graduated from college. And this has to be paid, because he will work for a company for a certain time. There's no violation of the rights here because they are under training. If you ask someone, and I will take this example of this app, we will create this app here. If you ask them if they agree in having this apprenticeship without being paid, they say yes, they agree. I train people for airlines, so they will be very happy in going to the airport for 3 or 4 months and putting in practice whatever they are learning in the classroom. This is like going through reality for a while, and as they pay their own transportation to go to their education center, they will use the same money to go to the work on site. And this won't disturb any reality that they have vis-a-vis their payment. This is the rights that are not being affected here. This is not a labor matter or a labor issue here. I have lots of questions for you, Maria Isabel.
We'll ask one question. Susan or Candy, you've talked about training.
We talk a lot about the training of workers, but not the training that small firms, bosses or managers need. In your experience, public employment services offer also training to the managers or small firms, and how this happen.
So you're asking if they can provide services to managers as well as job seekers, a training?
Yeah.
I'm sure they do. I don't know right off the top of my head. That might be something Pam, we through our partnership, NASWA deals with the states, I deal with the members, but there's no reason that they couldn't. And I know that they do provide HR services, and so they can also teach them how to do some of the work themselves. Like I said earlier, writing job descriptions. A lot of people that don't have a true HR department, they don't have a clue how to write a job description. They don't know how to do mock interviews. They don't even know the legalities sometimes of doing an interview appropriately. So they can certainly do training for those managers that need those types of skill sets. One thing I wanted to mention earlier, something else that they do on behalf of the job seeker and in conjunction with the partnership with the employers. Right now we're seeing a lot of transitioning veterans coming back, and they can drive tanks, they can drive really large, military vehicles, but then they want to get a job at a trucking company like J.B. Hunt, for instance. But J.B. Hunt says you have to have a commercial driver's license, or various type of driver's license. Well, they're working to build certification programs to help those job seekers become certified to do those jobs without actually having that specific license. So they're doing certification programs as well. So there's all types of assistance. And I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of skill out there. They just don't know what is really needed sometimes. And the companies that take advantage and say, hey, I need your help, they're more than willing to help. And as I said, that's the goal that we all have, and that's finding people jobs. So again, that partnership is really important, and they will do those skills training. So.
As regards, can you well hear me? Okay, without this noise, because I try to improve that. So as regards training of managers for SMEs, that is a very specific question, I would say. Yeah, I would say in general, if SMEs are lacking management capacity in European countries, you often have chambers or associations who would be responsible for that to develop offers, and then the staff should get trained there. What public employment services can do that concerns unemployed managers. Yeah, so to find a job for these unemployed managers and to see whether they might a bit of an update. For example, what is typical for long jobs in small and medium enterprises, that staff does not do a lot of training. So then a manager might need an update on technical developments or new management methods, plus an internship to find a new job. And that brings me back, or brings me to another point you mentioned earlier here in the discussion, and I think this is very important for Peru and other countries, and there exist also concepts in Europe, is what can public employment services do for startups? Yeah, and there I see a real field for active labor market policies, because if that is supported by a state, there are in general programs for unemployed, for example, who register with the PES, and then the public employment service offers them a startup help program. That means they have to develop a business plan, they get seminars, they get trained in skills and knowledge and competences they need to run a business. And I think that can help not only to make small enterprises better, but then to build bridges to formalize informal jobs. And the last point, I was inspired by ADECO to reach and serve small and medium enterprises. It is indeed a big opportunity for public employment services to use all kind of modern technological tools like apps. Why not create an app for small and medium enterprises? Yeah, what public employment services can do for them? Presume that there are sufficient capacities to serve them when they come.
Thank you.
Maria Isabel, as the link between education and the business association, how do you see the adjustment of the educational plans? Well, I'm informed in the business association, CONFIEP. I've been there for a month. There's been a change in the board of the association, and what we want is to open a committee at the board that has to do with job and education. And the Vice Minister, you're invited also, so that we can have the synergies that are not needed. So as I pertain to the educational sector as well as the business sector, I have a dual commitment for this to work and for this to actually occur in the fastest way possible. The idea is to actually take advantage of the 26 formal associations that exist, that encompass fishing, industry, manufacturing, TV and media, etc. It's 26 of them. But we really want to take advantage of that and to have roundtables and dialogue fora to really know what the sectors need, what the employers need, and the productive sectors and the educational sectors need to have this link and to actually do this. This is something we are assuming as the educational committee within CONFIEP to really do it as fast as possible. So we really want to do it. The commitment is there, and we'll try to do it as fast as we can. David, one last question, thought-provoking question, actually, but if the public employment services keep on getting stronger and reinforced, do you think that they will be a competition for the private employment services like ADECO, or is there a space for both? Or how can you coexist? No. I don't think there's competition at all. I mean, each one has its own space. I think public employment services are much focused and targeted on, the people, on the job seekers. And I think private employment services are more focused on the demand side of it, the clients, the companies. I think, on the contrary, far from being competition, I think we can have a lot of synergies and there can be a lot of complementarity. Actually, it's already happening. So I think that this is the line that we should go on. I think the public employment services can really take advantage of the infrastructure, installed capacity that we already have in the different countries. So they can use our technology, our branches, just like the British said when they developed their first synergy, as I was telling you, to change the mindset, saying it really doesn't matter who does it. What matters is how many people we actually have with a formal job. So that's what we should focus on, not the who or the what, but the getting the job done. And so these synergies will continue happening. I think will continue. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for all the panel members for their contributions, your good answers, your great presentations and interaction. Thank you, everybody. And now we'll have lunch. I don't know if it's ready. They will give us the housekeeping notices. Fernando will tell us now. Thank you.